The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to be baptized by him. John tried to prevent him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and yet you are coming to me?" Jesus said to him in reply, "Allow it now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness." Then he allowed him. After Jesus was baptized, he came up from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened for him. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and coming upon him. And a voice came from the heavens saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today we celebrate the baptism of the Lord. It's the last Sunday of the Christmas season and the first Sunday of Ordinary Time. It kind of gets a dual role. We're kind of still in the beginning of the year, and last year about this time we entered into a campaign asking, what more can we do? Well, now I'm going to tell you that we're about to enter into a campaign called, What More Can We Do? It's not that I'm not creative, it's that this is somewhat intentional. Every year I want us asking, what more can we do? We should always be striving to do more. And sometimes the answer is, I can't do any more than I am. And that's okay. But I want us to be asking constantly, what more can I do? Because sometimes, last year I couldn't do anything. This year I can. We need to be constantly going deeper in our faith in various different ways. Last year, a lot of it was a financial commitment. There was a pledge card that was mailed to you. You're going to see a similar one in the mail this week, with a flyer telling you about the things we do in our parish. Honestly, read through that flyer, because it's amazing how much we do for as small of a parish as we are. We're actually on the larger half of our diocese. We're in the upper 50% of the diocese for size, so we're not that small. But honestly, for as few people as we have a lot going on. A lot is done by this parish, and that's a lot to be proud of. Frankly, I brag about you people. I enjoy bragging about you people to the brother priests. I'll come back to that later in the Mass, but nonetheless, there's a lot we do, but still we should ask the question, what more can we do? What more can we do? And I find it fitting that we would reflect on this on the baptism of the Lord, because the baptism of the Lord is a time for us also to reflect on, what does our own baptism mean? What does our own baptism mean? Jesus was baptized not because he needed to be baptized. He was baptized to make all water holy, and to tell us this is what we need to do. We need to receive baptism. And what happened at our baptism? At our baptism, we were washed clean of all sin, and the Holy Spirit came to dwell in us. There's a friend of mine who likes to say, there is no greater waste of energy than the untapped grace in the baptized Christian who doesn't use it. Think about that for a second. There's no greater waste of energy than the untapped grace in the baptized Christian who doesn't use it. There has been so much grace poured out into your life, so much grace poured into your heart, that God himself dwells within you. Does it look like that on a regular basis? Think back in just the last week. Think back over the last week. What was something you said that didn't reflect the fact that God dwells within you? What was something you said? I see some spouses kind of nudging their husbands, saying, I could give you a list. What is it that you've done in the last week that didn't reflect the fact that God dwells in your heart? That by your baptism, God dwells within you. Now, that's just the grace of baptism. Those of you who've been confirmed, God has poured out His grace even more. He's opened you wider to grace. That wider exposure to grace is meant to drive us out to others. By your confirmation, you're supposed to be a soldier for Christ, going out and bringing Christ to others. A man on mission, going out and taking Christ out into the world to others. In the last week, who's somebody you know that could have really used knowing about God's love for them? Why didn't you reach out to them? Maybe it's a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, classmate. Who is somebody that you could have reached out to in this last week just to let them know that God's love is greater than whatever they're going through? Who is somebody that you know has heard that the church says something about their life is a sin and they think the church hates them because of it? If the church hated sinners, then the church would hate me too. It's wonderful for us to reach out to people who think that the church hates them and say, hey, I'm part of the church and I love you. Yes, the church says that's a sin. Don't deny that. That doesn't help. Yes, the church says that's a sin, and the church also says that this is a sin, and this is a sin, and this is a sin. The church tells us all that we need to work on it. If you're looking for a sinner, just look for it. I'm right here. The church lets us all know that we have sins. And still the church says, I love you. And the call for us is to look out and say, how can I do that more? What more can I do in letting people know God's love? What more can I do in reaching out to others? What more can I do? It's a wonderful question for us. And honestly, we tend to come up with a long list of what I can't do. The second you hear the phrase, what more can I do? A lot of times we start coming up with, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this. I'm too young for this, I'm too old for that, I'm too poor for this, I'm too prestigious for that. Well, get over yourself if that's your excuse. But we always have these long excuses. And sometimes like, well, I can't solve that problem, I can't solve this problem, I can't solve that problem. There's a wonderful prayer from Oscar Romero in which he talks about the fact that there is no program that fulfills the church's mission. There's no one program that fulfills the church's mission. Sometimes people will say, don't do that because you're not addressing this issue. Well, if we only do programs that solve every single problem, we do nothing. People say this doesn't solve that problem. There's no prayer that encapsulates all of our hopes. There is no creed that explains every aspect of our faith. If we let ourselves get caught up in the I can'ts, we do nothing. We recently started up the Knights of the Holy Temple. We have a chapel and a chapter in our parish of high school. First year we're allowed to let the 8th graders in, but high school guys altar serving. There's some people say, well, what about the girls? And I'm like, what about the girls? Let's do something for them too. But don't rule out doing something for the guys just because that one program doesn't solve everything. We can't do this. We can't do that. It's easy to say I can't. But what about I can? What can I do? What can I do? When we ask that, so much more can be done. And especially if we rely on God's grace. I can't do a lot, but I can do something. Sometimes I've heard people say, why don't we have a Bible study? There's lots of Bible studies at Rock Point. Rock Point, they have all these Bible studies. All these families get together and they have Bible studies. And I look at them and I go, why don't you? Why don't you have a Bible study at your house? Why don't you have a group of 3 or 4 families get together and have a Bible study at your house? Well, I'm not qualified to do that. I don't have a degree in theology, nor do they. Nor do they. In all honesty, the most powerful Bible study leader who has influenced my faith life, my prayer life, and my vocation the most, to this day, does not have a college degree. To this day, he does not have and he didn't try to get a degree in theology. He went to some pagan school called IU. But to this day, he doesn't have a degree. And he is one of the most influential people in my life because he said, I can. He opened up a Bible and he said, I can read the footnotes. He got a good study Bible, and he reads the footnotes, and he actually pays attention to some of the commentary, and he just reads a book here or there, and he just said, I can. He's like, I can't be a theologian. I don't know all of these broad things of theology, but I know my faith well enough, and I can read some footnotes. Let's talk about it. And if we reach a point that we say, I don't know the answer to that, this is what you do in a Bible study like that. You go, I don't know the answer to that. You say it out loud, and everybody goes, I don't either. Let's go ask Father. There are ways that we can do more if we don't let I can't get in the way. There is no greater waste of energy than the untapped grace in the Christian, the baptized Christian, who doesn't use the grace within them. As we reflect on the baptism of the Lord, may we reflect on the graces poured out on us in baptism. May we reflect on the greater grace we were opened up to by confirmation. May we reflect on how God renews that grace in us every time we go to the sacrament of reconciliation. When you feel drained, when you feel dry, when you feel like you can't really live your faith, get back to the sacrament of reconciliation. Yeah, it's scary, but you know what? The priest isn't going to judge you. In fact, most of the time, he's probably going to be bored with your sins. It's the same as the last guy who was in there. Come and be filled. God opened you to grace at baptism. He opened you wider at confirmation. He wants you each and every day to be filled with that grace and to live from that grace. In the context of that, that's what I want people to ask. What more can we do? What more can I do if I simply let God work in me and through me work in the world?